All right, welcome today. My name is Jeff Day, and we're going to be talking about integrating art and audio in the modern workplace. This can be an absolutely jam-packed, power-packed session. We're in a sitting, standing room only space right now here at CD Expo 2024. This is my second opportunity speaking at the CIX Summit, so I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about a topic in which I'm very passionate. A little bit about me. I've been 31 years in tech and marketing. I started really heavy into what was the AV space with Cisco as a member of their collaboration team. And really for about 11 years, I was part of the telepresence group. So we brought telepresence to the world. I've been the CEO of a commercial integration company. I served on the AVIXA board of directors, and I was the board chair in 2020. And I am on the ISE board of directors. My term starts in January of next year. And looking forward to continue to contribute in the CEDIA AVIXA integrated world, so it's really exciting for me. What I do, my day job right now is I'm an executive at Leon Speakers. You may know us, and you're going to hear a lot about what we do at Leon today. That's the primary topic. And I live in Michigan. My wife's name is Amy. I have 4 children, 2 grandchildren, Reagan and Reed, and those are the things I like to do. So we're going to talk about 4 things today: the evolution and principles of workplace design, art as a medium, and acoustics and aesthetic in the modern workplace, tech solutions that you should be looking at, like things that should be part of your consideration right now. And I'm going to show you a handful of case studies of like where this actually works. So I'm going to start right here. A little known fact about me is I lived in Italy for several years. I speak, read, and write fluent Italian. I studied art history and literature in college, and I still speak today. If you've been in Europe, you may know this place. You're probably not seeing it. I'm seeing it. This is the Santa Maria del Fiore Chapel in Florence. It is a famous piece of architecture and design. That's going to matter in just a second. Cisco Telepresence is in the commercial market space, one of the first early telepresence solutions that were out there. So you may remember this one, quite well. These were really expensive video conferencing endpoints, and we used to call them bandwidth-sucking applications at Cisco. That was our mantra. We were trying to sell bandwidth. And at Leon today, this is Hudson Yards in one of our Fortune 100 customers. And that's what I do now. And design, style, and aesthetic, we used to call this selling the experience. And these actually tie together historically as well. So I'm going to talk for a moment about artful innovation and design. And in order to do this, we're going to have to go to the Tuscan countryside. And the Tuscan countryside is important for all things art because if you at least go back to the 11th century, 12th century, you'll see that there are just an incredible foray into the Renaissance period. In fact, Florence was the hotbed of all of this innovative style and design. And the Chiesa di Santa Maria del Fiore in Florence was important for a lot of reasons. Not only is it a beautiful building and it has a beautiful aesthetic, and it doesn't matter where you may stand outside of this building, it is absolutely gorgeous and spectacular. A big part of this, in fact, you may have seen a little bit of this made recently popular on a Netflix series. Lorenzo de' Medici was a big contributor, if you will, to the building of this chapel. The reason why that's important is actually he had members of his family murdered in the building. It was on an Easter weekend, and it was a wild story unto itself. But the Medici family were famous for commissioning art competitions back in the day. And those art competitions brought forward some of the most renowned and well-known artists in the world now. 2 of them were artists that you may or may not know something about, Lorenzo Ghiberti and Jacopo del Quercia. The reason why both of these are important is because there was a contest that was commissioned by the Medicis for the church. And that contest had everything to do with bronze casting. This is bronze casting, which is in the day a never been done before technology. There had been lots of casting before for different sculptures, but bronze casting was a new process. And there were doors outside of the chapel that were actually used by these artists to create different scenes from biblical times using bronze casting techniques. In fact, Ghiberti actually put himself in a bronze cast on the door to designate that this was the stuff he had done. But if you go around the chapel, you'll see all of these different casts. There was one problem in this building. It didn't have a top to the dome. It was built in such a way that it was just open sky. So if you walked into this chapel and you looked up, you just see the open sky. Now, I suppose that's a great story for looking heavenward, but not probably what they intended. So what happened? They had another competition. And in this competition, the guy who lost the bronze casting was a different artist. And he was so distraught from having lost that he went to Rome for 10 years, and he was very distraught. But in the process of hearing about this competition, his triumphant return back to Florence was to actually come up with a concept to fix the dome problem. And it came from the shape of an egg. And that egg was used to create the cupola, which is over that chapel today. And that was the return of a great artist. So what I'm trying to draw to you now is the way that technology evolved in Italy was all driven from innovation around art. It was art and architecture long before it was acoustics and aesthetics. Acoustics and aesthetics were important, but the design systems that were important for that time, as well as the standing testament today of that cupola, which is still there in Florence, is an example of what is applicable today for us. So, why does that matter? It has everything to do with what we are experiencing right now. The modern workplace can actually go back hundreds and hundreds of years. But if you look at the modern workplace, even in the last 100 years in the world today, you're going to see some really interesting things. But I would start with every integrator needs to understand whether they're doing luxury residential or they're doing commercial market spaces, elements of design. They have to pass through an art class. I would tell you right now that nobody should graduate with a technical degree without some depth of understanding in art and history. If you don't have that, you're going to be out of place in a conversation where your technology is trying to become applicable to an interior designer and an architect, and you are speaking literally English and Italian. You're speaking two different languages. So what are the elements that you need to understand? You got to understand space, line, and light. These are basic elements. Color, form, and texture. These principles and elements of design play out in every space that you work in today. And it doesn't matter whether it's 2024 in the modern workplace or if it goes to 1923 and the then modern workplace. That was modern at its time. But we're going to go and take a look at some of these pictures and a little bit of this history that will give you a good sense of how this all comes together. So the first thing that I want to take you into is this idea of line. Look at this room. This is a luxury home. You can see it has beautiful TV and a sound bar on the wall, things we do at Leon. But how many lines do you count here? Horizontal lines, vertical lines, lines in furniture, lines in technology, lines in physical space, as well as the lines that are associated with the light. And those are the elements that I think are really important to consider. Additionally, in these spaces, we have consideration in things like texture. So texture refers to physical materials, and that could be things like chairs and couches. It can be the fact that we're using leather or we're using wood products. How about light? Light in a space like this is going to permeate in the space. It's going to bleed through, and it's going to create a really a warm and inviting space. Color is a dominant feature in this room because we see the oranges matching the grays, and we see the walnuts matching the other forms that are in the shades, for example. And then last is the use of space, geometrically speaking, where everything is placed. So now let's go back in history and let's look at elements of design. We just kind of walk through how it applies in a workspace today. Good to see you, Kathy. And elements of design. So I'm going to take you first to New York City. So this is, of course, the Empire State Building. Absolutely beautiful facility. It reflected an Art Deco period. In the 1920s, that was a major dominant aspect of design. We live in Detroit, Michigan. This is the Kahn Building in Detroit, which is where it gave way to the boom of the automotive era. And right across the street from that building is a building called the Fisher Tower. The Fisher Tower is it's an icon in Detroit because not only was it built during that period, its interior includes everything that I'm just talking about. So this was a building that really reflected high style and high design. So not only did it have beautiful arches, beautiful ceiling painted materials. In fact, where that light structure is coming from in the center is a shape that's very well known in the audio world. That's 444 megahertz, and that was a design. It actually has a look. So we like to think that art and sound have been melding for quite some time. And the ripple effect of dropping a pebble in the water and seeing that is the same way with sound shapes. Sound shapes are art. But did you know that it was at this time that electricity was introduced into buildings? So 1925 is when electricity was available in a commercial space. So up until that point, we did not have anything but gas, or we were using heat, from different, sources and locations. So it's important to know that that gave way to the kinds of things that were available in those spaces. This is an example of the Barcelona chair. I don't know if any of you have one in your office or in your space, but the Barcelona chair was another. It was a Mies van der Rohe. It was an iconic piece that was really important to the time, and it reflected a sense of style and design. That same space can be carried through into other facilities that the average office space in the 30s, 50s, or 30s, 40s, and even a little bit of the 50s looked like these. You had mixed mediums. So check out the shapes. You've got these circular shapes. You've got these shades and draperies, these light fixtures. We've got line and form all playing out again. Right down to, I like to think of this as Lex Luthor's lair. This is a classic Deco-inspired space. There was a person at the time named Frederick Winslow Taylor that was studying physical space and design. And he is considered the godfather of scientific management of how workspaces are organized. This is an important term to know, because if you are in the integration world and you want to be relevant to your architects, drop this name on them. Hey, have you ever studied Fred Winslow Taylor? And they would be like, heck yeah, I took a class on him. Right? So this in the tech world is important. And what did he study? He studied how people worked. He studied where chairs were placed, where desks went. And you can see that the style back then in the day was you had a manager, that was sort of in their main primary seat looking out over all the workers. You had the workers sharing a co-work space. And in that co-work space, they used a lot of pens and papers, but they were basically doing the same things that we do today. This was another shared office space where we had two people sharing a co-work space. It was open seating. It used lighting and design as part of its configuration. Here's another example of the same thing. Seems pretty drab and bland, I know, but what are we looking at here? We're looking at the science of workplace. How is a workplace set up? What you should also be paying attention to is the fixtures in the rooms. So that's really important when it comes to the collision of residential luxury and commercial interiors, is the intersection of the two meant that tech had form. It wasn't just hidden in the ceiling. So these are some of those pieces. This right here was a radio. You can see the speakers in the base of the unit. This right here is one of our favorite styles. It was called the Atwater Kent. Circular speaker, cloth grill, actual physical metal material. We've got these in our office in Ann Arbor, and we actually go out and we hunt for them. We collect them. We are collectors of ancient technology architecture and artifacts. So if you're in Ann Arbor, come by. Our place is more like a museum than it is a manufacturing center. And these are examples of what we're looking for. We're saying, why is it that we had beautiful, aesthetic, high-grade quality stuff in our design, and we've completely lost that today? And part of it is because the form factors have changed, the technology has changed, but the commitment to style and design has not. This is another example of an RCA megaphone, that was used again back in that style. Let's go 10 years into the future. So into the 30s and 50s, now we're moving into an Art Deco contemporary era. And look at some of these spaces. Look at the mixed use of wood, in particular in its shape and style. This was a bureau or a credenza that would be a classic desk where two people would sit. But that today is almost unheard of, because we're predominantly using laminates and other materials. What if this was your desk? Does it inspire an aspect of creativity? I don't know. It may not do it for you, but it was a really, really important part of the era. The shapes, the colors, the sizes. This is what the lobbies look like. These are in what a lot of those buildings were doing. In terms of the workspace, it was pretty cramped. But basically it was the use of a lot of space, a lot of people co-working. They dealt with sound attenuation issues. They dealt with lighting issues. You'll notice on this side that people sat closer to windows because they didn't have full dependence on lighting fixtures yet. Lighting fixtures came later. But the way that the spaces changed were you could put more people into a floor the more you had integrating lighting overhead. This is not your challenge today, but this was challenges that were dealt with 100 years ago. So what I'm saying is your challenges today are no different than they were 100 years ago. The context is just a little bit different. Here's another example of the same. Check out this. Hey, we can use lights. So they went nuts, and they incorporated them everywhere. What you're not noticing yet is the use of interior audio. Audio really had not hit the scene fully at this point yet. But by this point, we'd gotten into the telephone, we'd gotten into other technologies. So now we move into the 1950s and 60s. This is more contemporary, modern, abstract, mid-century era. We had artists like Jackson Pollock, for example, that was doing absolutely beautiful, spectacular work. And in those spaces, we had what is one of my absolute favorite mid-century modern consoles. Look at that thing. I mean, it's got gold grills, it's got collapsible features, real knobs. Everything was pedestal-based in the 60s. But this was technology. This was high design, high technology. This is an example of another credenza with actual wood slat grills, from its time period. That's how they presented their speakers. So they did not just put a speaker on the floor. They didn't put the speaker in the wall. They were actually celebrating the tech, celebrating the style and the shape. This is a Dieter Rams MCM. It's like a console that's got a record player. It's got speakers into it, but I like to think of this as the first modern soundbar. So soundbars are something we know something about, but Dieter Rams was one of the first that really did it in his original design. His famous quote was, "The best design is the least amount of effort and work." That was something that, we talk about how do we sell in the tech world today. We start talking all crazy jingo and lingo and language, but sometimes we don't realize that the best problems were solved long before us using simple aspects of design, which is really important. The other thing about Dieter Rams' company is eventually it was bought by a company called Braun. So if you have an electric shaver, there's a good chance you're using a Dieter Rams design today, Here's another example of physical spaces where that started to change. You can start to see the use of color and shape. You start to see the use of technology, intercom systems that were used to call people in those big, wide open spaces. In those spaces as well, there was still a lot of co-working happening and even starting to pick furniture and forms that matched in those same environments. This is a classic office environment back in the 50s and the 60s where they started to use technology like this. These are Bogen speakers. So have you seen a Bogen up close? This is a very famous manufacturer in our industry, been around for a very long time. What do you notice about them? Walnut. You notice the grill cloths. You notice very clean aesthetic, in how it is presented. It's an important conversation. But watch how tech changed pretty quickly. It's like, then we moved into, fallout shelter megaphones, a lot of use of metal, because it was space age era. In fact, if you visit our booth here at the show, we have an Airstream 1967. It's all metal. It was a period in time where the use of metal was considered not only sustainable, but super stylish. And if you have an Airstream trailer today, you know exactly what we're talking about. These are RC on-wall speakers, so this would have been the beginning of using intercom systems in the office space, or the RCA Z5 635. So these were in the office. They would go right next to a plant, and they were used for omnidirectional sound in the floor. So you would place these throughout the floor, and they would introduce passive music into those spaces. All right, we're continuing our journey through time. The 1970s was pop art, right? So we got the Andy Warhols. Guess what's happening in the commercial space? The TV is now really showing up. The TV was something you might had in your house, but not really in your office. But the TV really started to take off. It took 20 years from 1938 to sell 1 million TVs. Do you know how many TVs we sell annually right now in our industry? 220 million TVs a year. 220 million. It's a staggering number. But pop art never went away, and the idea of audio aesthetic and art was important then. This is a design that came during that period from a guy by the name of Robert Rauschenberg. This is AT&T's building library, and he imagined a sculpture called Soundings. So Soundings is literally, you can see these really beautiful elements. It was designed to be this backlit material that you could see through, and you would walk up to it. But why would he choose to use Soundings? Well, the reason why is in his written statement about what the piece was all about. So radios, oracle, soundings, this is what Teledyne said. Robert Rauschenberg's handwritten draft of the statement about radios and soundings, 1968, in their facility. And on the left, he says, "I was envious of current and endless changes of information. All of material, with the exception of technology, were gifts from the streets. The attempt to make it a musical instrument that could be performed with or without sophistication. Soundings is visual audio, not audio visual. It's visual audio that can be the spectator controlled, the images are controlled by the pitch of sound, and they're illuminated." So what this thing was is when you walked by it, it played music. And it said, this is 1967, so you'd walk by this thing, it would light up, it would play sound, and it was because the artist saw it as visual audio. We like to think of that today. It's like, where did we get to audio visual versus visual audio as an art medium? Moving forward, Bürolandschaft was a German term about creating soundscapes in those spaces. This is where those RCA omnidirectional speakers started to show. You can also see people became fascinated with foliage. So if you're out there seeing today greenery, in spaces, this happened long before us. This was easy 50 years previous, as well as the advent of the cubicle, co-working spaces, and beautiful speakers like these. The JBL Synthesis L100s, classic design. You get your hands on these, they still sound good. And they were designed to be beautiful pieces. Right up into Bogen's additional iterations, cloth grills, this idea of acoustical transparency. This is a project that we worked on at Leon in Muscle Shoals Studio down in Alabama. So if you've ever heard Sweet Home Alabama, Leonard Skinner, and any of those guys recorded in Muscle Shoals, we actually created a system that went around a TV that made it look like it was from that era, even though this is only about 5 years old. So we are a company that takes our cues from the history and applies it in technology today. In-ceiling speakers, other office interiors and environments, these are just snapshots of spaces you're more and more familiar with, all the way down to today. So the modern workplace is modern in what way? That is my rhetorical question to you. Because the reality is the spaces don't really look that different than they did 100 years ago. We're still using the natural lighting. We're still using high ceilings. We are using technology, but one thing is noticeably absent from these beautiful modern spaces: artful audio. Where did artful audio go? Audio was pushed into the periphery because it couldn't be presented as beautiful as the things that you're seeing, unless you start to think about space as an artful destination, which requires you as an integrator to think about that. So here's some examples of what that looks like. When you're putting in video walls in boardrooms and conference rooms, we do matching grills over speakers that are directionally appropriate. We put frames around TVs, something we're very passionate about at Leon. We put integrated systems in walls that blend in with the environment and take advantage of the acoustical properties of the space. These elements of design are important because you have to think about the integration of art as an aesthetic and an acoustic in order for that to work. Now here's how I would think about this. If I'm a technical person, I would be thinking about, in the spaces that I work in, I have to reflect on three key aspects of sound and how sound travels. It is either absorbed, reflected, or diffused. And if you think about speech intelligibility, in a home, it is called dialogue. And when you step a few feet away from a speaker, if you hear any muffling in that speaker, it doesn't sound right. In the commercial market space, this is identical. Yet, when we put different types of speakers in a room, we lose intelligibility at a distance, it's called an STI range, where we start to get away from the speaker in the room. You have to understand the dB loss that happens from the distance in the speaker. Yet, what are we doing with a lot of commercial products? We're putting plastic 2-inch drivers in the front of a room and hoping they pump enough sound 40 feet back, right? This requires an artful sense of style and design. Shure makes a beautiful example of what this all looks like. They have some great assessment tools that look at the results of poor audio. So speech intelligibility is the thing that you have to think about in your workspaces. And stress and cognitive load and effectiveness are all directly tied in this research that they do in, that you can check out on their website that goes into a little bit more detail. But speech intelligibility has to go into your design consideration. Noise control. We're working in environments that have reflection, absorption, and diffusion. And so where is that coming from? It's coming from new forms of HVAC. Back in the day, it was just cold. Bring a blanket. Now we're talking about very comfortable spaces. Psychoacoustics is critical. If you're in a living space and you are watching a movie, where do you expect the sound from that movie to come from? Right in front of you. You're expecting it to be here and enhanced over here. Yet we're defaulting to in ceilings, or we're not putting enough audio into those spaces to enhance it. The human brain can't discern overhead speech as intelligently as it can directional audio. So when you start to get into things like room reverberation and echo, these are things that have to go into it. So here's my gentle suggestions of how to deal with this. Number one, you got to be really cognizant on how to use materials in space, but you don't just put sound attenuation panels up. You got to know what technology is out there to actually play around with the artful representation of it in your space. So if you want to work with consultants and you want to add more value in the conversation, understand that you have limitless possibilities of sound attenuation tools. Here are some examples of them. So you can see some sound attenuation boards that are perforated on the side. They've got some in-ceiling attenuation panels that blend in with the space. I don't think these all look great, but I'm just using these to give you an idea. This is sound attenuation panels on the sidewalls, but check out the use of color and geometric pattern in the space. It's a great way to reflect it, including those TVs. Those TVs have sound dampening panels behind them, so it diffuses properly audio coming from that space. Now, I don't know about you, a little hot pink here, that's okay, good with me, but that's sound attenuation right there. It's just beautiful, artful representation in the space. Here's another working space where those cubicles actually use sound attenuation in the directional path of audio. This is a funky one. I don't know what to think about this one, but you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? All the way down to this one I actually like. It matches the brand extremely well. So they're using different geometric patterns and shapes, and then certainly the forms and the colors that go along with it. There's a lot going on in this room. I wouldn't do this, but they're dealing with glass, and check out how they're doing it. They're using attenuation chandeliers, and those lighting fixtures are actually set in sound attenuation chandeliers. Here's another example of space where the same type of form is broken up. How about you're working in a space with a lot of concrete? So sound dampening materials should be artful, right? Not just drab. And you're going to be looking for your designers. They're going to be anxious to get those recommendations from you on the kind of things that are possible in their spaces. Art can be an attenuation thing. So it's important to know that not only can physical art dampen sound, but you can actually use geometric patterns as wall coverings to do the same. Here's a couple examples of the use of curtains, as well as other pieces to do that. So sound attenuation, that's something that I would be very focused on. Here's artful tech, some of which is here on the show floor today. There's a company called Vacoustic. If you've not heard of them before, you should go check these guys out. They make a really neat wave wood panel. It's a sound attenuation panel, but it is designed, you can see how it is here in the left side of the picture. It's designed to go up as an artful piece that actually helps to dampen the sound in the room. But it goes in as a piece of art, and it is an AV company that has created this. Here's another company called CIX Acoustics. They have some very cost-effective sound dampening art, so you can go pick from their gallery. You can even add to their gallery. And they are different ways that you can incorporate that, right down to these wood patterns, that you can see that are part of the CIX acoustics directory. So I always say, if you're really in a bind and your finances are an issue, at a minimum, go look at galleries of art that you can do some stuff with. There's another company not here today, but you'll see it in a lot of design shows, called Buzzy Space. These guys make those beautiful chandeliers that you were looking at earlier, some really gorgeous forms that can be put on the walls. Bang & Olufsen, they are here. If you've not seen a Beosound shape, these can be built on wall. They're beautiful. They are sound tile speakers, and then they're covered with these transparent grills. So you can see an entire wall of sound. Where did we get this from? 1973, the Grateful Dead built the wall of sound. So now you're seeing walls of sound be built into common workspaces. At Leon, we've got a product in our booth today. It's called the Ente Sound Tile. The Ente Sound Tile is a speaker with a piece of art that goes over its shape. This is called the Ente Sound Sculpture, and it is another piece that does the same. And it's a really beautiful element that can add style to the space. This is one of my favorite videos. Rick Ross, the boss, if you guys are familiar with this famous rapper, came into one of our spaces, and let's see what he had to say.
You ever seen art that plays music? Cut it up some more for me.
Sound tiles.
Cut it up, volume.
He doesn't even call it a speaker.
Hold up.
Now he
Play
sees
this
it's
one.
sound
Play this
sculpture.
Play this artwork.
Play
Cut
this
it
artwork.
up. Cut it up.
So projects like these with Rick Ross, are important because those sound sculptures go into residential spaces, but they also go into hotels. They go into lobbies. They go into restaurants. They go into a number of places. We make them, so that's how I know that. All right, let me take you through a couple of case studies in our last few minutes here today. So, place in Vietnam, it's called The Vibes. This place is all about the integration of art and sound and style. This place is gorgeous. It is a co-work space. This is the WeWork of Vietnam. Why is it important? Because its design is gorgeous, physically, aesthetic, beautiful. It has hanging gardens. Where did you see that? 1965, all right? It's back, right? And also the use of bamboo rattan shafts. This is a space that you go into for the purpose of being completely inspired. Now you're saying, hey, where's the co-work spaces? Well, they're right here. They're actually blended right into the physical environment. So you see people that are working into the space. You can rent these areas. They've got a fully rentable section. This is a conference room right in the middle of the Vibes. And you can see that not only do they have these beautiful, gorgeous co-work spaces, but they actually use the sound of their physical spaces. Check out that ceiling sound attenuation style that they're using. It's incredible. This is the outdoor lobby again. These are the places you can rent, the Chill, the Omni, the Concept. For the sake of time, I'm going to spare you this video just for maybe a second. This is called the Water Feature. There is a place in the Vibes that sounds like this. It is a soundscape. So if you're involved in the wellness category at all, they use the sound of the clacking of the bamboo to actually create a sense of stillness, a sense of wellness, and you can just hear click, 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 click. So I want to work here. That would be really cool. But that's what I'm saying is in the visual audio space, we got to pay attention to this, right? Here's another one. This is another co-work space down in Naples, Florida. What's great about this one is we have not only, again, the shapes, the sounds, you look at the in-ceiling speakers, you're talking about the sound attenuation properties, the podcast studios, everything that's associated with it. It is designed to be a very approachable space, just like it was in 1930 and 1940 in some of those offices and those design centers that I showed you. I'm going to forego this video as well. Here's another one called Studio BV. This is another space that was actually a retrofit 1930s facility using the same forms and shapes. How do I know? Look at the ceiling. That kind of high ceiling with the cornice edged and the why am I drawing the blank on it? Help me someone. What do we call it when you put a... Molding. Thank you. Who said it? Thank you. Yes, the molding. So the molding is fully restored, 1930s, 1940s. And you can see the use of color, shape, material, and form. Isn't that gorgeous? Right down into the basement co-work spaces, you can rent these rooms. But using, are you ready? Sound sculptures. Those are sound tiles in those places, designed to bring sound and art to those places. All right, this is some Leon stuff. This is my world. This is stuff I work on. So this is Paul Rodriguez. He's a famous skateboarder. If you're a skateboarder, you may have heard of him. We actually created a butcher block of recycled skateboards to create a specialty wrap around his TV. So this is 250 recycled skateboards compressed together, and it made a specialty wrap around his TV with sound. This is the chandelier over his pool table in his office, which is a skate park co-work space. And it has speakers in that chandelier. So these are his signature gold skateboards. This is his adjacent room, which has another TV that's set to be a throwback style TV, which we created again with a Leon walnut wrap. It's got a Leon retro, take it back to 1950s look and feel with a 1950s grade grill. Those are important elements that go into the artful use of audio and style. Here's another one we did. I talked about it earlier, Muscle Shoals Studio. This is where some of your favorite music from that period, Sweet Home Alabama, you take your pick, they were recorded there. They commissioned us to actually do the same material that was originally used. So we had to not only get the material, we had to build the enclosures and systems, including this grill cloth. So this grill cloth is literally a restoration of an original grill cloth. And those are the kinds of things that we do. This is a company we work with in New York City. It's called Me and the General. The General is one of the original Blue Man Group members, if you are a famous Blue Man Group fan. They are a design team. They do beautiful spaces in New York City. We designed what we call the Swick board with the General. So that is a speaker surfboard. And here are some examples of what they look like. The subwoofer is the fin of the speaker. This is a bar that we have done with them with the speaker over the bar. So that's an integrated speaker in the surfboard, a Swick board. This is a living room with a custom surfboard hand painted to give it the Maori look and feel. So you can see artful audio. How would you like this to be your living room? That's pretty sweet, So why is this important? These are signature furniture pieces that executives put into their office. We know because we build them. We're commissioning them, and that's how we think about them. Here's another person that commissioned us to build something really special. These are called the Studio Kerr Specials. We don't always do custom at this level, but it's an example of artful audio. These are towers with 18-inch Leon subs and actually it's the 21-inch sub, it's the 18-inch, it's a 12-inch mid, and it has its own tweeter cone, at the top. These things rip. And the guy that had us do them wanted it to look like his gold Chevy Impala. So this is the swatch. Can you build this thing? And we built a DJ table for it, and that person was Michael Bennett of the Seattle Seahawks. So he's a linebacker, he's a Pro Bowler, and this is his living room. He's got his Studio Kerrs. So the whole idea of artful audio, Michael is an artist. That's what he does. And so he was not going to put just speakers into his place. That's how he thought about it. There's another set of artists that we've done quite a few things like this for as well. These are python skins on the facade of these speakers. So real python skins with these exterior walnut shells. But you may recognize the name Raekwon the Chef from the Wu-Tang Clan. This is how it came into Leon. So just watch this.
Leon speakers. Yeah, we can do that. For who? The chef? Oh, we're gonna cook up something marvelous for the chef.
7s. There's only one version of them in the world, and they're in his living room. So that's commissioning of artful sound. Here's another example. These are fresh off Leon's line. This is the next version of the Pythons. We call these we don't even have a name for them. But that's a Japanese Shishobu style of burning of the facade of those speakers, and that is an actual laser cut, wood burned in skin, Python skin around that speaker. You know, so very artful consideration of signature pieces in space. This is Dallas Cowboys Stadium, right? It's another way of considering artful representation of speakers. Don't just do a speaker in the wall, put a sound bar in the wall, cover it with a grill. So we've done it for every luxury suite at Dallas Cowboys Stadium in the commercial market space. So how does a Leon doing Raekwon specials work for the Dallas Cowboys and Apple Computer and JP Morgan? Because we're considered artful representation of sound. Here's some other things. This is Peloton's world headquarters. This is another Fortune 50 account in New York City where we did a perfect match frame around the TV against their steel case furniture that they were just not happy with how that TV looked, and they want it to look a little bit better. Ford Motor World Headquarters where we did the same framing, and a couple of other boardrooms that just show you the aspects of style, including speakers in light bollards that were fully customized, as well as, there you have it, another sound sculpture. The last thing I want to show you, just a little snapshot of some other things that we do in those commercial spaces, is one of those in action. This will be the last thing that I share with you today, and I'll just close with a couple sentences after that. Here we go. This is an example of when it all comes together.
New York is amazing because it continues to reinvent itself all the time. Hudson Yards is a great expression of that. An entire community here, home to great new corporations, great residential spaces, and great opportunities for Leon.
We're at one of our Fortune 500 clients that are in the financial services market, located here in Hudson Yards in New York City. They opened a new headquarters here and wanted to create an environment that was very warm and inviting for employees to come back into the office, really a second home, but at the same time embrace the hybrid work model. So to do that, they had to introduce some new technology. They wanted it to fit into the workspace, into the architecture, and really be transparent, and that was the real challenge.
Customization is what we're all about at Leon. We can customize virtually every single product. And remember, we're designing it, we're engineering it, and we're building it here in the US. So we have the ability to interact on a daily basis in real time.
In the larger conference rooms and the telepresence room, the challenge was we had to put a large monitor recessed into the wall and still mount underneath that the camera and the multimedia system. And once that went up, it really blended everything together and made everything really fit into what the architect had designed. In the multimedia presentation room, the challenge was the monitor could not be recessed. So it was going to hang on the wall with the cameras and the system underneath it. With that, we went with the Edge Media frame and built it around the monitor. And Leon customized that fit specifically for the monitor and the camera system, and what really ended up being a work of art. In the huddle rooms, we had a unique challenge. There was a freestanding table and wall. In those rooms, they still wanted the multimedia that's in the other rooms, so we still had to put the monitors in, the cameras, and the audio. We had the Edge Media frame wrap around that, and Leon custom stained that wood to match the wood of the furniture. So the end result was something that looked like it was designed more by the carpenter and the furniture company than by an audio-video engineer.
This project with River Systems was challenging in the context that it required custom finishes, it required our tech concealment solutions, but also our tech enhancement solutions. And River Systems has done a great job here, great aesthetic, great technology, all together in one space.
So I want to thank you for your time today. If you want to get in touch with me, here's my contact information. You can check us out on the floor. We've got some of these things here today. Absolutely, positively, there is an intersection between the commercial space and the residential luxury world. We believe deeply in it, and thank you very much. Good to spend time with you today.